Hector Hugh Munro, or Saki, was born in British Burma in 1870 and was educated almost entirely by governesses before being sent to England at the age of 12 to further his education. He would return to India to follow in his father's footsteps as an imperial police officer, but returned to England after several bouts of fever laid him out. Munro began writing historical pieces for British magazines, but soon moved to writing political satire for newspapers. Much of his work contrasts the conventions of Victorian and Edwardian England with ruthless, honest struggles of nature and humanity. Many figures in authority meet their untimely deaths or downfalls to the whims of nature, his most famous being the interlopers and the toys of peace. Look for wit and wisdom, even the macabre, in Saki's characters to learn a moral lesson, as his characters haplessly forge ahead to their gloom and doom. The Purple of the Balkan Kings by Saki. Leopold Wolkenstein, financier and diplomat on a small, obtrusive, self-important scale, sat in his favored cafe in the worldwide Habsburg capital, confronted with a new free press and the cup of cream-topped coffee and attendant glass of water that a sleek-headed piccolo had just brought him. For years longer than a dog's lifetime, sleek-headed piccolos had placed the new free press and a cup of cream-topped coffee on his table. For years he had sat at the same spot, under the dust-coated stuffed eagle that had once been a living, soaring bird on the Styrian mountains, and was now made monstrous and symbolical with a second head grafted to its neck and a gilt crown planted on either dusty skull. Today, Luitpold Wolkenstein read no more than the first article in his paper, but read it again and again. The Turkish fortress of Kırklareli has fallen. The Serbs, it is officially announced, have taken Kumanovo. The fortress of Kırklareli lost, Kumanovo taken by the Serbs. These are tidings for Constantinople resembling something out of Shakespeare's tragedies of the kings. The neighborhood of Adrianople and the eastern region, where the great battle is now in progress, will not reveal merely the future of Turkey, but also what position and what influence the Balkan states are to have in the world. For years longer than a dog's lifetime, Luitpold Wolkenstein had disposed of the pretensions and strivings of the Balkan states over the cup of cream-topped coffee that sleek-headed piccolos had brought him. Never traveling further eastward than the horse fair at Temesvar, never inviting personal risk in an encounter with anything more potentially desperate than a hare or a partridge, he had constituted himself the critical appraiser and arbiter of the military and natural prowess of the small countries that fringed the dual monarchy on its Danube border. And his judgment had been one of unsparing contempt for small-scale efforts, of unquestioning respect for the big battalions and full purses. Over the whole scene of the Balkan territories and their troubled histories had loomed the commanding magic of the words, "the great powers," and even more imposing their Teutonic rendering, "die Großmacht." Worshipping power and force and money mastery as an elderly, nerve-ridden woman might worship youthful physical energy, the comfortable, plump-bodied cafe oracle had jested and gibed at the ambitions of the Balkan kinglets and their peoples, and unloosed against them that battery of strange lip sounds that a Viennese employs almost as an auxiliary language to express the thoughts when his thoughts are not complimentary. British travelers had visited the Balkan lands and reported high things of the Bulgarians and their future. Russian officers had taken peeps at their army and confessed, "Well, this is a thing to be reckoned with, and it is not we who have created it, for they have done it by themselves." But over his cups of coffee and his hour-long games of dominoes, the oracle had laughed and wagged his head and distilled the worldly wisdom of his castle. The Großmacht had not succeeded in stifling the roll of the war drum. That was true. The big battalions of the Ottoman Empire would have to do some talking. And then the big purses and big threatenings of the powers would speak, and the last word would be with them. In imagination, Luitpold heard the onward tramp of the red-fezzed bayonet bearers echoing through the Balkan passes, saw the little sheepskin-clad mannequins driven back to their villages, saw the augustly chiding spokesman of the powers dictating, adjusting, restoring, settling things once again in their allotted places, sweeping up the dust of conflict. And now his ears had to listen to the war drum rolling in quite another direction, had to listen to the tramp of battalions that were bigger and bolder and better skilled in warcraft than he had deemed possible in that quarter. His eyes had to read the columns of his accustomed newspaper, a warning to the Großmacht that they had something new to learn, something new to reckon with, much that was time honored to relinquish. The great powers will have not little difficulty in persuading the Balkan states of the inviolability of the principle that Europe cannot permit any fresh partition of territory in the East without her approval. Even now, while the campaign is still undecided, there are rumors of a project of fiscal unity, extending over the entire Balkan lands, and further of a constitutional union in imitation of the German Empire. That is perhaps only a political straw blown by the storm, but it is not possible to dismiss the reflection that the Balkan states leagued together in command a military strength with which the great powers will have to reckon. The people who have poured out of their blood on the battlefields and sacrificed the available armed men of an entire generation in order to encompass a union with their kinsfolk will not remain any longer in an attitude of dependence on the great powers or on Russia, but will go their own ways. The blood that has been poured forth today gives for the first time a genuine tone to the purple of the Balkan Kings. The great powers cannot overlook the fact that the people has tasted victory and will not let itself be driven back again with its former limits. Turkey has lost today not only the Kirkcalce and the Kumanovo, but Macedonia also. Luitpold Wolkenstein drank his coffee, but the flavor had somehow gone out of it. His world, his pompous, imposing, dictating world, had suddenly rolled up into narrower dimensions. The big purses and the big threats had been pushed unceremoniously on one side. A force that he could not fathom, could not comprehend, had made itself rudely felt. The august Caesars of Memnon and armament had looked down frowningly on the combat, and those about to die had not saluted, had no intention of saluting. A lesson was being imposed on unwilling learners, a lesson of respect for certain fundamental principles, and it was not the small struggling states who were being taught the lesson. Luitpold Wolkenstein did not wait for the quorum of domino players to arrive. They would all have to read the article in the Free Press. And there are moments when an oracle finds its greatest salvation in withdrawing itself from the area of human questioning.